Our top story. Israeli warplanes have bombed the heart of Beirut this morning, bringing down apartment blocks there shortly after Israel issued a last-minute evacuation order. The strikes today are some of the most intense to hit the centre of the Lebanese capital in decades. At least 12 people are reported to have been killed, including an employee of a Hezbollah-run television channel. Children are among the injured. Now, all this in a country that's seen more than 1 million people displaced in the past 10 days or so. Well, let's get the very latest from Claire Paquelin. She's our reporter currently in the southern Lebanese city of Sidon. Claire, tell us then about where you are and what's been happening there today.
Well, Sidon is known as the gateway to the south of Lebanon. And I can tell you, behind me, in the area behind me, at around 9:30 this morning, there were 4 Israeli strikes here. We don't know if they were drone, from the air or from the sea, but 4 took place here. 2 people were killed, 2 others were injured. Sidon has become a refuge place for many Lebanese people who have been fleeing from the south. The city is very, very crowded. We've been speaking to people who are sleeping in tents, people who are sleeping in their cars along the seafront. There are shelters for people here, but they are overcrowded. People are very reliant on aid given out by charities, food, bottled water. It's a pretty tense atmosphere in Sidon at the moment. Earlier on, I was further south in Tyre, in the city of Tyre. Now, that's very much in the red zone, so the Israeli army reissuing late last night its evacuation order, telling residents there to leave. And we have heard recently from the Arabic language spokesperson of the Israeli army saying that the Israelis will now be targeting crossing points across the Litani River to try to prevent Hezbollah from moving men and supplies and weapons. This as Hezbollah continues. We saw that lots last night. Several rockets from Hezbollah being fired from the south of Lebanon into northern Israel. When we were in Tyre, we were told that there had been 6 Israeli airstrikes so far today in Tyre. And above our heads, we saw at least 3 what appeared to be Israeli aircraft in the skies as 2.
And Claire, take us then to that dramatic footage we played at the top of the programme, the bombing of the heart of Beirut this morning. I understand you were actually in the capital today when that happened.
It happened in the early hours of this morning, not too far from where we were. So we went to the scene as fast as we could. And the building, as you can see in those images, completely flattened. What's interesting is that same building was targeted in the lower floors last week. But it was the strike in the early hours of this morning that brought it to the ground. But the Israeli army did give out a warning signal. And so people nearby were able to evacuate. And as we understand, there were no casualties. While we were at that site of that flattened building, we heard another blast, and so we got into the car and drove for about a kilometre to a different neighbourhood, the Zoak al-Balat neighbourhood, and there we saw the impact of a precision strike on the 7th floor of a building there in a highly densely populated area. So even though that strike was a precision strike, it really was clearly really targeting one particular apartment building and one particular floor and one apartment. The nearby buildings, particularly one of them opposite, had been impacted as well. And certainly, I've got to stress, this is in central Beirut. This is not in the southern suburbs, the Dahya. This is not in the Hezbollah stronghold. And I was speaking to locals there. So we saw people in those central Beirut neighborhoods with their suitcases leaving, just trying to get out as quickly as they could. Others, though, one gentleman that I spoke to was there with his wife and 3 young children who said, we don't have anywhere else to go. It's either we stay in our homes or we end up on the streets. So for now, we're choosing to stay in our homes.
All right, Claire Paquelin reporting for us this hour in Sidon. Earlier on this morning, she was in the Lebanese capital, in Beirut. Thank you. Well, with Lebanon, as we were hearing there, now being increasingly drawn into the heart of this war between Iran, Israel and the United States, I'm pleased to welcome to the programme now the Lebanese analyst, Ayman Mhanna. He's the director of the Samir Kassir Foundation. Look, Ayman, good to talk to you today. Can I just get your reaction, first of all, to these scenes in central Beirut this morning, Israeli bombs falling, sort of within walking distance of downtown Beirut, walking distance almost of the Lebanese government?
It's a real tragedy. It's a tragedy that Lebanon has been witnessing and living through time and again. It is also unfortunate that the latest strike killed a journalist working for Al-Manar TV station, because it shows that civilians are also paying the price of a confrontation that Lebanon has not chosen, that was imposed on Lebanon. And our country has become the theater for a war between Israel and Iran, using Lebanese tools when it comes to Hezbollah, but a war that none in Lebanon has chosen. None of the Lebanese people want this war, neither Hezbollah's constituents, nor the Lebanese government, nor any other single citizen. And the fact that we have no agency to stop it unless we go through such a deep division in our country makes our hearts burn.
And look, let's talk about how the Lebanese government's been responding to what's happening. We have now over 1 million people displaced in Lebanon. It's worth reiterating Lebanon's a country of just some 5 million people, a little more than that. Israel's begun a ground invasion as well. So is the government able to respond to what is clearly enormous needs by its population?
We need to separate between two levels, the political level and the humanitarian level. When it comes to the purely humanitarian level, again, the government is managing a crisis it did not choose with very limited resources. And this matters when we assess its response. But when it comes to the crisis unit, the crisis cell that was set in the Grand Siraya, the Prime Minister's office, alongside several other ministers, we've seen a lot of professional response coming from the Lebanese government. And it's a response that is related to trying to distribute aid in the most transparent way, where different departments coordinate rather than having duplication in these responses, involving the international actors, the World Food Programme, UNICEF, UNESCO in a coordinated way. We have every evening a statement by a different minister explaining how their ministries are responding to the crisis. And we're not only talking about the ministries that are typically in charge of these types of responses. We've seen excellent measures by the ministries of tourism, agriculture, and many other. But this is purely on the responsive side. The real problem is political. The government has expressed since its formation the desire to have monopoly over weapons in the country. It has expressed in a much more explicit way in August of 2025 its desire also to restrict weapons only in the hands of the government by the end of 2025. Then a plan with the Lebanese armed forces was put in place. However, the implementation of that plan is taking much longer than what Lebanon needed. And more recently, the government outlawed Hezbollah's military actions and asked the military and the judiciary to put an end to any armed measure by Hezbollah. And we've seen a failure to enforce this decision. So on the one hand, we have a government that is trying its best to manage the crisis, the humanitarian and the refugee or displaced crisis, but a much negative weakness, actually a real weakness in implementing the more essential political measures that would put this crisis to an end or that would reduce the time of the ongoing war.
But isn't it really rather unrealistic to expect the Lebanese government right now, the Lebanese army, to try and disarm Hezbollah when the country is being bombed?
It's definitely unrealistic in the current situation. This is why the pressure from Lebanon's allies, from Lebanon's friends, the French proposal, for example, are important to give the Lebanese government the ability to actually implement its decisions. But deep inside, my real question mark is about the political will. I know it exists in the executive. However, we are today paying the price of long years of buying time, of kicking the can as a strategy. We've reached the limit of that past attitude. Today is the time for tough choices that would create, on the one hand, elements for the state to increase its credibility. And this goes through a very good response to the crisis when it comes to supporting people, preventing hate against refugees, preventing further divisions across sectarian lines, and at the same time, symbolic measures by the military and the judiciary against Hezbollah. We're not saying here this armament of Hezbollah will happen overnight. But today there you have military commanders and political commanders within Hezbollah that are threatening that very government of being dealt with as a Vichy government once the war ended. They are literally calling for executions. If the judiciary doesn't take clear measures against those who utter these threats, including on social media, and we're not talking here about bots, we're talking about real people calling for explicit murder, if absolutely no action is made to hold these people accountable, we cannot at any moment ask anyone in the world to believe we are ready to take more definitive measures and more actionable measures against the military wing of Hezbollah. So the sign of political will is essential, and it's still missing.
And look, the president, Joseph Aoun, not just explicitly critical of Hezbollah, talking about how the group was working to collapse the Lebanese state, he also suggested that it might be time for Lebanon to have direct talks with Israel. That's something France has floated as well. What do you make of that idea?
I think we've tried every other way of dealing with Israel in the past, and none have worked. We've tried armed action. It's worked until 2000, and Israel withdrew from Lebanon. But after 2000, everything that was done in the military, on the military front in order to confront Israel has only brought destruction to Lebanon, has only brought displacement, and has further exacerbated every single crisis, economic, social, sectarian, that Lebanon is going through. So today, negotiations are not optional at this stage. They are necessary to prevent a deeper escalation because we haven't tried anything else. It is time to try a new approach in dealing with Israel. However, negotiations require, some success factors. First, a relatively positive response from the Israeli side, which we haven't seen so far in a very explicit way. And we're also, deep in the Lebanese quagmire of negotiations, horse trading inside to see who will be represented within the negotiation committee. So we're debating already the composition of the negotiation team without necessarily having a roadmap for that negotiation. And Lebanon is full of dilemmas. If you do not represent all segments of the population and of the political spectrum in the negotiation team, you can have Hezbollah and even their allies who would say this doesn't represent us and it doesn't bind us, which means that the negotiations will fail. But at the same time, if you include them and give them the same type of power that Speaker of the Parliament, Nabih Berri, a Hezbollah ally, has had in previous indirect negotiations, we've seen the results of these negotiations that lead to very broad terms that can be interpreted in very different ways by the different parties, and that eventually only create some small periods of stability, but that are followed by even worse military actions, similar to the ones we are seeing today. So today, what is actually missing is political will to change course, to realize that everything that was done in the past in terms of managing the war, managing the relationship with Israel, managing the relationship with the internal segments of the Lebanese population have failed. It is time for a new approach. And we don't have the luxury of perfect conditions. Lebanon doesn't have that luxury anymore. We have to work with imperfect tools and make our best to make them credible. And this requires first asserting the credibility of the government. The government cannot make good actions on the one hand and lose its credibility on the other hand, and then ask the world and the population to believe its good intentions. We need credible actions, and these are so far only limited to humanitarian response.
All right, Ayman Mhanna, really good to get your analysis of the situation in Lebanon, the internal politics. Thank you very much indeed.